Y'all have been waiting for this, so let's get straight into this homemade sandwich bread recipe. There aren't a lot of ingredients that go into this bread. I was asked to include how much I spent for all of the ingredients together. And no, you do not have to use bread flour. You can use all-purpose. We're going to start out with some room temperature water into a bowl here. To that, we will also add milk. Once that's in, I'm going to heat this up in the microwave, but you can heat this up on the stove. Keep an eye on it because we don't want it to get too hot. We just want it about 100 degrees. Mine is a little bit less, but it's okay. To this mixture, we're going to add our yeast and just a little bit of sugar to feed the yeast. I set my timer so this can sit for about 5 minutes. I work on my dry ingredients, which is the rest of the sugar and some salt. And then we'll come in with the flour and make sure that you are measuring your flour properly. Back to our yeast. You see here it's gotten frothy. It's ready to use. You're going to add that little by little into your dry mixture. If you don't have a stand mixer, this is how you will stir, just with the spoon, the back of the handle. I have a stand mixer, so I'm just going to let that do the work for me and keep an eye on it. It'll start to form. I'm not adding any extra liquid, just letting it knead with the machine. And this is what you'll see. Once it comes together, we'll add a little bit of our butter at a time, about a tablespoon at a time. And we're going to go into kneading this mixture after each tablespoon has been added. Here's the dough after all of the butter has been added. So we'll take it out of the bowl and we're going to begin to roll it on a clean counter just to shape it together. I'm keeping contact with the counter and just moving it around to give a nice round edge. This might take a little practice, but it's not as hard as it looks. So you'll keep doing this here until your dough looks smooth. And once it's looking more cohesive, then you're going to drop this ball into a greased bowl. Okay, now we'll cover our ball baby with some plastic wrap and we're gonna let this rest for about an hour. Before we get ready to bake, we're going to take some butter and thoroughly coat the bottom of this pan. You want for this butter to just pop right out. So I'm taking here what I had left over from using the butter earlier, and I'm gonna just rub this around in the pan, and I can tell that I did not have enough, so I am going to go in with some more. It's better to have too much than not have enough. So make sure you're thoroughly getting in every single nook and cranny of that pan. I cannot stress it enough. You do not want this bread sticking to the pan. You want it to just plop right out. So get your hands in there. It'll be okay. You just wash them off when you're done and grease that pan down. Also, if you have a problem with your bread getting too brown, double your loaf pan. Then it will cook more evenly. Now an hour has passed. You can see this dough has grown in size here. I'm just taking off the plastic. And once we remove the plastic all the way, I'm just going to gently take some of the air out. I'm going to punch it down. Just releasing some of the gas bubbles that have built up here. And after it's punched down, I'm going to just flip it right on out of the bowl onto my floured work surface. It's very lightly floured, not too much. I'm going to just start flattening the dough out. I just kind of want to get it into a rectangle shape to make it a little bit easier to work with. So you just see me here stretching it. If you have let your dough rise properly, you should be able to stretch it without it pulling back. If it is pulling back, then you do need to rest some more. So now I'm just gonna roll the dough out here. So I don't want it too thin, but I want it to be like a nice even thickness all around. So I'm using my rolling pin that's kind of broken, but don't worry about that. And we're just gonna roll this dough out until it's a nice even thickness. You'll see me every once in a while just lifting up the dough. I'm just making sure that it's not going to stick to the cutting board. And I'm just gonna continue to shape it until I'm happy with about how thin it is. And once I have it all the way stretched out to my liking, I'm going to take the ends and tightly begin to roll it. Like if you were rolling a cinnamon roll, that's what I'm doing here. But make sure you're keeping it tight and close. And you see how the ends are kind of poking out? You'll see me taking the ends of the dough and wrapping that over so that those ends aren't poking out when they cook, because you don't want them to get cooked faster than the rest of your dough. So I'm just tightly rolling, slowly going down, making sure that I'm not going to have any air bubbles as I move it. I'm just going to adjust this as I need it. You see me wrapping those ends over so that I don't have that little spiral poking out. I'm just going to continue to just roll down this dough until I'm all the way to the end. And it gets easier as you go down. So once I have that done, I'm just going to pull the dough closer to myself so that it's easier to work with. And I'm going to be making sure that that seam side is up, because that's what we're working with next. We want to make sure this seam is closed. And you'll see at the end, I was not paying attention to where my seam was, and you'll see what happens when you don't. So I'm pinching the seam. It's kind of hard to do with the camera facing me, but you want to make sure that it is flush with the dough. Make sure it's pinched all the way down. You do not want this dough unraveling when it bakes. A lot of the comments on my TikTok were telling me to make a slit in the dough. That only works when you're making a crusty bread. This is not crusty, so you are going to make sure that the seam is all the way closed, or your bread is going to begin to unravel from that spiral that we rolled earlier. And since my log is a little bit longer than my pan, I'm just squishing it in some so that it can fit in the pan a little bit better. But you see, when I put this into the pan, you will see where my seam is. That seam needs to be on the bottom. I have it on the side because I'm not paying attention while I'm filming. Don't be like me, be better than me. I'm going to fix this bread into here so that it's laying flat as possible, but I'm not looking at where that seam is, and I should have tilted the bread over some. I'm just going to scoot it into the middle so it has room to grow. And then I'm going to, you can either take some plastic wrap, like the one you had over the bowl earlier. I have another pan that is exactly the same size. So I'm going to invert the pan and I'm going to place it on top so that it has room to grow and it's not inhibited by any of the plastic. Either will work just fine. So we're going to let this sit here 30 minutes to an hour. And when you open it up, it'll look like this. It's been in a warm place, so it's had time to just continue to puff up. And so now it's ready to bake at 350. Watch for color. The times will vary. You know what bread should look like. So make sure it's not too white, not too brown. And then let it sit for a second after you take it out the oven. But make sure you pop it out while it's still hot. And this is why you have to make sure your pan is buttered thoroughly. I'm popping this out the pan here with my hands. Bow, look at it, came right out because I buttered that pan to the death, okay? So we're gonna flip this over here and you can see where I did not have that seam at the bottom, and it made a little blemish, but it's not gonna alter the taste. It's still gonna be fine. And here's just another little close-up of, you know, it's a little beauty mark, but she's still okay. And that's it. That's how you make the bread, guys. Let me know if you have any questions.